I really would say employee engagement is at the heart of Sky's success.
If a person of the team is really engaged with what they're doing, they're going to be at their best.
In turn, we invest massively in them.
It's really important that we as employees feel connected and engaged to the work we're doing. And when we get this right, we deliver even better content, products and services for our customers.
Prior to Glint, it was quite inconsistent as to how we would actually monitor engagement data. It was very difficult to pinpoint what the main concerns were.
Glint felt fresh, it felt different, it was quite innovative.
The dashboard's really easy and simple to use. It pulls out the key themes. People can access surveys on their mobile, iPad, laptop, so we can reach everyone. What's been really great about working with Glint is they've enabled us to reduce our question set by half. Our full question set was only 19 questions compared to previous provider where we asked 45. We released results to managers the day the survey closed, which was amazing for managers because they can act on the results quickly.
Glint as a tool, rather than having one feature that's a standout feature for it, as a package, it's invaluable. It saves you loads of time in terms of mining data, doing the analysis, enabling you to spend your time where it's valuable. It's the only empirical evidence we have of our return on investment.
It's invaluable because my job is all about people. So in sales, we've got over 5,000 employees working in the operation. So it's a big people operation. So in terms of employee engagement, it's fundamental because it's all about having great conversations with customers. If an employee is engaged, they're going to be at their best, and that's going to show with customers.
The implementation of Glint has massively changed my role. I've got access to a really great set of data at my fingertips. In an insight role, the power and the potential of that data is enormous.
The teams would say that since using Glint, quite a lot has changed. It gives them a platform to have their voice heard, and then because it's such a simplified process, we can really break that down into a very effective conversational tool. So it's an ongoing conversation instead of a one-off activity.
Employee engagement is vital to the success of Sky. We do see people as our greatest asset, and if that is the case, harnessing that and understanding what drives people, what motivates people, understanding the culture that we have here so that we can retain our best people and attract people into this organisation by selling them a compelling vision of what it is like to work at Sky. And there's no greater way to gauge and sense what it's like to work at Sky than the people who work here telling you exactly what they think.
Hi, welcome back. And if you're just joining us, welcome. I'm Justin Black. I lead the Glint People Science team. I'm moderating along with Katie Farrow the sessions for today. Coming back from the break, we are going to talk about alignment. And the two big themes that stand out for me as I took a sneak peek at some of the materials were the uncomfortable and the unexpected. And we're going to start with a little bit of the uncomfortable, depending on how you look at it. I'm so glad to be joined, so grateful to hear the stories from Kailey Burrows and Jenessa Disler. Kailey is a people development specialist at Bell Flight. Jenessa is the manager of culture and people development, also at Bell. And I will send it to them now. So Kailey and Jenessa, take it away.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jenessa Disler, and Kailey and I are so excited to be here with you guys today. Just a little bit about Textron and Bell. Textron is a company consisting of many different brands in the aerospace, defense, and industrial industries. Our position is unique in this employee engagement space because we lead this employee engagement program from a business unit perspective specifically working at Bell Flight, which is a manufacturer of vertical lift technology. Our positions are similar to many of you all, where we're ensuring Bell's culture and people are developed to be their very best. I want to give you a sense of who we are and where we've been and how we've been able to use Glint as a tool to promote our culture change through transparency. But first, I want to level set with letting you guys know that this is our first time using a partner like Glint and our first survey in 12 years. So last year, we attended the Glint Summit as customers, like many of you all, but we had never rolled out a survey of this magnitude before. The networking breaks and the things that we were able to glean and learn from the Glint customers was just invaluable to how we were able to set up our program for success. So we're hoping to pay that forward to you all today by sharing some of the insights that we've learned. Next slide, please. I want to give you a little bit of insight into who Bell is and was, as well as who we are today. We have a very rich legacy of building incredible flight machines that support our warfighters and first responders. So you might know us from the MASH helicopter or our V-22 Osprey helicopter that the military uses. And because of the close relationship with our military and our veterans perspective that we internally value so much, we've historically had more of what we call a command and control culture. In 2015, we had a new CEO named, and his name is Mitch Snyder, and he had an entirely different vision for what Bell could be. Now, as you can imagine, not everybody wanted to follow suit and be part of that change from the legacy that we once were. So we had a saying internal to the organization that we had a lot of Bell barnacles, people that just were really resistant to change and didn't really want to move forward into that new vision. But Mitch had a vision of unlocking the potential of flight through novel and coveted vertical lift experiences, and he has a contagious passion for people. He's truly a servant leader, and we just feel so blessed and lucky to have somebody like that as our visionary CEO. And he's made amazing headway. So we are just a entirely different organization in the way that we operate, feel, and look. And you can even see that in looking at some of the pictures through our journey. A lot of the things that we focus on now are still our legacy aircraft that we, feel so passionate about, but also the people that makes that happen. Even before we had partnered with Glint and thought about an engagement survey through Glint, you might be curious as to some of the cultural transformational things that we've done in order to fulfill Mitch's vision and the potential that he saw within us. So in 2015, when we kind of embarked on this journey, the very first thing that we did was just simply listen. Our intent was to listen to understand. And the first thing that Mitch did as a new CEO was to initiate a partnership with a consulting firm called the McChrystal Group. You may not have heard of the McChrystal Group, but you might have heard of the Iraq operation to take down bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. General Stan McChrystal and his Joint Special Operations team defeated the decentralized network of Al-Qaeda by casting aside a century of conventional wisdom and trying something completely different. He tore down traditional silos, created an agile, empowered task force, and reimagined hierarchical military structures to complete what they called the team of teams approach, which is focused on small team agility and empowered decision-making to create alignment. So they helped us execute an organizational network assessment that showed our leadership where the silos were in our organization, in how we communicated, and within our processes. That colorful explosion graphic that you see there is a representation of their assessment to barriers in decision-making, as well as an over-reliance on very specific groups or bottlenecks. So from there, we executed on processes to bring those silos in. We created processes that resulted in a unity of decision-making, a shared operational environment, and a team to keep those measures sustainable and created accountability. And what this looks like in day-to-day application is 350 of our leaders meet every other week to review goals towards our strategic objectives, share leadership observations and insights, as well as hearing from our top executive leaders. And for many of you in the organization, if you've worked at other companies, you might not have seen this strategic planning and strategic alignment done really well. I know I haven't at previous organizations, but at Bell, this really took it to the next level, where we have an amazing amount of alignment at the leadership level, and we're trying to drive that down in the organization. Now, as culture professionals, we know that just because a leader executes well on what they do doesn't mean they execute as effectively on how they do it, right? So you all as talent professionals know that interpersonal behaviors are almost always the downfall for somebody's career when that goes sideways. It's not typically a lack of expertise or technical competence. It's usually a lack of playing well in the sandbox that usually derails somebody's career. So parallel to creating a framework around execution, we also created a framework on how people can execute. We created consistent shared values and core competencies. And just to give you insight into what that looks like, a lot of companies say that they value trust, integrity, and respect. But at Bell, we realize that those are just table stakes for us. Those aren't going to be the inspirational and aspirational values that really propel us to be who we want to be going forward. So we created more inspired values and help people understand the guardrails of what some of these behaviors look like. And just an example of one of our values is lift each other up. So how inspiring is it that we don't just say we respect somebody, but that we do something that lifts somebody's spirits, or that you're expected as an individual to go out of your way and actively do something to help somebody. While our talent and strategy teams were working with to refresh Bell's inside, our branding team was working hard to refresh what Bell looked like to the outside world. We had an entirely new brand, tone of voice, vocabulary, recruiting materials, just an endless amount of how we were visually representing ourselves to the outside world. So for Bell, one of our most important charges is to ensure that the government and military customers believe in who we are and what we're doing, which means they need to feel 110% confident that we can execute to deliver safe and secure aircraft. So it's critical that we got our brand right to be able to tell the outside world that we can be your trusted partner. All of these efforts, of course, didn't happen overnight. What you see simplified on this slide was a culmination of 5 years of worth of work and worth of really hard work. But this work is what we believe will carry us into the future, because we took a hard look at ourselves and did the hard work to change who we were from the inside out.
Yeah, thanks, Jenessa. We had done all this great work, and then COVID-19 hit. So it was a surprise to us all, and our plans to execute that flawless first engagement survey as a next step in the culture change process that Jenessa had talked about was postponed. We found ourselves at this crossroad. How would our new company show up at this time that was just so confusing when everybody was scared? Nobody had a playbook for what to do next. We knew we didn't want to lose that momentum of the culture change that we had worked so hard to create. And when we look back at this crazy time in 5 years, we were asking ourselves, will this be a setback, or is it going to be a time when our new culture was able to shine through? So we needed to ensure that our employees felt heard. The term radical transparency was thrown around a lot. Everything was so confusing. We had to be 100% transparent and show up visibly in ways that made sense to different groups of people, whether that was on the shop floor or in the office. And compassion was our guiding light. What actions could we take to show that people cared? We needed to find creative and different ways for our leadership team to show up in ways that they weren't used to doing. So overall, really, we thought about what are we trying to achieve? We were trying to make sure our employees knew that leaders are visible, listening, and transparent, because no one had the answers, not even our ELT members. So with these guiding ideas in mind, we turned to Glint. We had already established a partnership with them. We had almost kicked off our first survey, but we were postponed. And as expert listeners and people science experts, we knew we could use their expertise as a tool to show us how to listen and be compassionate during this time. So because of that, we executed a really short survey and took time to listen and tell our leadership team what people were saying. And this was really our opportunity to create those unique touch points. Emails were obvious, but we had to get really creative with our shop floor population. We curated talking points specifically for those leaders and encouraged our frontline supervisors to check out for themselves what were the employees saying. We referenced that meeting format, Jenessa did, that 350 biweekly leader meeting, and that was truly critical. That work we had done to set up that culture change in the past 5 years was critical to our success during COVID. And really, surveys are only as good as the results you share and the actions you take, which we all know by being partners of Glint. And we had that avenue set up and ready to be used. And we've seen some great results. Our response rate increased over time, along with our amount of shop floor population, which really just shows how employee trust had grown in us, in our leadership team. And as many of you probably know, you really do have to fight for every single percentage member of those shop floor participants. And for our October engagement survey, which thankfully we worked very hard to kick off, our overall favorability increased by 4 percentage points from our last COVID survey. So we're really excited to continue seeing progress there. So overall, given this was our first survey, it deployed during an unprecedented, as people love to say, global pandemic. We had some lessons learned. So trusting employees with information and vice versa. Employees trusting leaders can be a risk on both sides. That's why change management is really the backbone of success. I've linked in this PowerPoint the template that we originally used that Glint created, as you can think through some key aspects of the change management process. We really only changed it briefly and just added an opportunity to put in our context from the business unit perspective. And then secondly, just share and repeat expectations. You would think this was really easy and self-explanatory for our leaders, but with our culture rapidly changing and the environment rapidly changing, our leaders just had to be told over and over that the expectation truly is for you to share results transparently. And even though we may think as culture leaders that of course we would share results, leaders, especially our more technical colleagues, really need a framework and process for doing that. And you remember what Jenessa said, the bell barnacles? Well, they are still here, and they need some a little bit more transparency and framework. And then beginning with the end, what are your goals? What does your ideal state look like? Really outline what you're committed to. And that goes for objectives too. We had a hard time outlining what these were at first, and we had to be really selective finally about the content and quantity of questions. And then finally, just don't be afraid to get creative about transparency. What does that mean to your organization? People may come up with some really creative ways to share results. But if COVID has taught our team anything, it's that we have to find nimble ways to help our employees share information and enable them to be safe. So with that, thank you guys so much. It was great to share the story of how our culture was strengthened by this time of transparency, learning, and making mistakes. And we're really ready to continue on our culture transformation journey. No longer is it the executives making decisions about change and cascading that to groups of different shapes and sizes where it doesn't always fit perfectly. But each leader has the ability now at each level to make small shifts that impact their culture for the better. So employees seeing their leaders trying and succeeding at being better based on their feedback is what's going to move the needle from here on out. So thank you again. And Justin, I believe it's your time to take it away.
Thank you, Kailey. Thank you, Jenessa. It's fantastic. My hand already hurts from all the notes I'm taking from today. So I'm just going to call out 4 things quickly that of the many things I wrote down while you were talking. One was I wrote down this note about how grateful I was for courageous leaders and practitioners like yours and yourselves who take on these large-scale, difficult efforts that they know are worth it, because so many companies say it's going to be too hard and we're not going to do it, or it's going to be impossible. And so, in having achieved the impossible, you give us stories we can tell other people so that they can believe it's possible, which I'm really grateful for. I love the bell barnacles thing, and what a great piece of imagery to use to drive change. I will steal that, not bell obviously, but the barnacles part. The way that the organization seems to have combined a bold vision with rigor in the how and commitment to the process, I think it's a really good lesson for people about managing paradoxes and change, and it seems to be really well executed there. And the final point is about response rates, that we keep getting this question about, as the average number of check-ins has gone from somewhere between 2 and 3 a year across Agile organizations to 7 since March 2020. How do we know when it's too much? And response rates keep going up. And so I don't think so far we're seeing a signal from employees that it's too much, but we'll keep watching them. Okay, great. Hopefully I've given Lori and Maria enough time to get ready. Well, I've done my summary, and I'm really happy now to introduce Lori Moser, Maria Hasan, respectively the heads of employee experience and employee engagement at Bristol Myers Squibb. And I know how many people debate the difference between those two topics, so I'd love to be in a meeting with the two of them while they do that. But today, they're going to talk about the unexpected. So I'll hand it over to Lori and Maria. Take it away.
Hi, I'm Lori Moser, Head of Experience and Engagement at Bristol Myers Squibb, and I'm really excited to be here today. So let me tell you a little bit about Bristol Myers Squibb. We're a patient-focused company, and we are inspired by our vision, which is to transform patients' lives through science. Our mission is to discover, develop, and deliver innovative medicines that help patients prevail over serious disease. And we believe our talent is key to enabling that mission. Let's go to the next slide. January 2019, BMS announced an M&A with Celgene. We would grow our company from about 20,000 to 30,000 employees with a targeted close date of mid-November. This would give us less than a year to integrate. Our mandate was not just to integrate Celgene, but create one company that took the best of both with an evolved new culture and even a new brand image. Our colors went from pharma blue to bright purple. In HR, we knew from previous transformations and acquisitions that employee engagement and retention would be at risk on both the Celgene and BMS side. Just with the initial announcement alone, you could feel the tension of uncertainty within the company. Let's go to the next slide. So external research supported our concerns as it indicated we would see a massive decline in engagement post-close. And it would take about 36 months to recover, which would significantly hurt our ability to perform and innovate for patients. We believe the best way to mitigate the risk was to check in with all our employees more frequently, not only to monitor their engagement, but also understand their sentiment. We needed to do this not only with our BMS employees, but also understand the perceptions of our Celgene employees. We decided to contract with Glint to support a pulse strategy and immediately launch a change management integration pulse prior to integrating. We surveyed both the BMS and Celgene populations. Through that, we were able to quickly assess through the data and comments what were the concerns to focus on for the different populations as well as our similarities. We used the data to coach our leaders and to push early connections across the company, provide more clarity around timelines and roles and responsibilities, and we use the data to thoughtfully design the integration experience for the two companies. Let's go to the next slide. After we integrated, we switched the focus of our pulse to be centered more around engagement and culture. Our questions align to our new values seen here. This would help us keep an eye on engagement, but also figure out how best to establish our new culture and embed our values. We also had leadership support to run the pulse quarterly. They agreed that we would establish a baseline in December and then run a second pulse in March in which we would launch the manager dashboards. Our baseline told us sense of belonging was key for Heritage Celgene and that they were highly neutral about our culture, but believed in our overall mission and strategy. We could also see that our Heritage BMS team members were motivated by having their perspectives valued. We believe the next survey in March, in which we would open the dashboard to all managers and promote dialogue, in itself would actually address some of these opportunities. So our second company-wide pulse survey was scheduled for March 2020, the day after we told non-essential employees to work from home due to the pandemic. And so what I'm going to do now is hand it over to Maria to share that experience.
Thanks, Lori, and good afternoon, everyone. So as Lori mentioned, we were moving along, taking the insights we learned from our baseline pulse to establish our new culture, and suddenly the world changed. I remember it clearly. Our next quarterly pulse was scheduled to launch on Monday morning, and the Thursday prior, we received an email from our CEO saying working from home was now mandatory for all global colleagues. Immediately, we all started experiencing feelings of fear, uncertainty, and stress. That's the thing with the pandemic, right? It was a global unifier. It wasn't a pocket of our people who were impacted. It wasn't even just all BMS employees. It quite literally was every person on the planet. So as we tried to process this new way of working, there was one thing we knew for sure. It was going to be critical to maintain connections with our employees. We knew right away that we still needed to send this pulse out. Now, transparently, I don't think we had consensus on that decision right away. Remember, the pulse was still new. It was only the second time we were going to send it out, and some of our most senior leaders felt that it may be a little tone deaf to ask people things like, how happy are you in a moment like this? This is where I have to give a huge shout out to Glint. Glint's customer success team was always such a great partner, but this was the first of many times that have followed in which we relied heavily on their people science team. We used their white paper to help strengthen our position to Pulse employees, and we were successful. We incorporated 4 Glint suggested distress questions to our existing engagement survey and launched it with consensus later that week. So what did that pulse and really all the pulses that have followed tell us? Well, most importantly, we saw a big uptick in employee engagement. And when we dove deeper into the insights, words like grateful and proud were the big blue words in our word cloud. And there were so many things that contributed to that. Our employees felt we reflected those values Lori talked about earlier in our COVID-19 responses. They were also very complimentary of our leader communications and transparency. Our CEO was regularly sending out updates to employees and finding ways to stay connected with the global workforce, often through quick video snippets. And it really resonated with our folks. One of my favorite things our leadership team did was they changed their formal headshots to informal work from home selfies. And at a time when employees were dealing with so much uncertainty, it was great to see that our leaders were going through this just like us. It really humanized the entire predicament. Speaking of humanizing, we also learned very early on that the impact of this pandemic was very personal and unique to each individual. We were able to use filters within the Glint dashboards to help identify those differing needs. For example, there were people who were struggling with adequate technology resources. Remember, we were not a traditional work from home company, so suddenly shifting to a completely remote work environment was uncharted territory for a lot of our workforce. We made the appropriate internal teams aware of this feedback, and they were able to quickly mobilize on how employees can procure any necessary resources. To this day, we continue to use the insights from each pulse to inform our ongoing decisions. For example, as we started to see hints of burnout creeping up in our June survey, we added a new "How are you doing?" question to help ascertain employee wellness. The responses from that question further cemented the fact that lines between work and life are blurrier than ever. And based on that, we're actively messaging on the importance of prioritization and talking about ways of working norms within teams. Another example of a small change with a big impact was that a number of our leaders added a simple statement to their signature that read, "I'm sending this email when it's convenient for me. Please reply when it's convenient for you." We've learned so much in our first year of pulsing, especially during an integration and global pandemic. Most importantly, we've learned that there is great power in listening to our employees. Going into this year of integration, we braced ourselves for this anticipated drop in engagement. But very quickly after that first pulse, Lori and I would joke that we were the most popular people in the company. Our leaders couldn't wait to see the results after each pulse. Nearly half of our managers logged into their dashboards the first day new insights were available. And there was great conversations happening all over the company based on these results. And that was critical in helping maintain that sense of connection while we were all physically distant. We are here because pulsing our organization gave us near real-time insights into employee sentiment during this crazy year. By listening to our people, actioning on their insights, and providing transparency, we were able to maintain those high levels of engagement. And we're hopeful that as we continue along this journey, we will use our pulse insights to appropriately respond to timely sentiment and continue the trend. Lori?
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to our journey. Our incredible partnership with Glint has really helped us manage through a pandemic implement a successful integration and establish our new culture. Actually, a few weeks ago, we just found out that BMS has been recognized by MIT Sloan Management as a leader in cultural excellence, and we're super proud of it. We firmly believe our listening strategy played a real important role in accomplishing this. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Lori. Thank you so much, Maria, for sharing your journey with us. I learned so much, so many great, actually concrete tips I took. I'm going to steal from your executives that you shared with us, but also a thread that I think runs through your presentation and Kailey and Jenessa's is around openness. It's the openness of leaders, of your people, organizations, to try new things and to take on hard tasks and to work toward them together. It's so important as we try to change and do things differently. We're not trying to make small differences in the outcome, and so why should we make small shifts in the process, right, along the way? So it's really inspiring. I'm really grateful for those stories. I think to your point towards the end, Maria, one of the most incredible things that we've seen in the feedback from employees through this time since March 2020 has been the response, "Thank you for asking." So regardless of what the scores are, there's so many comments in the pulses that we never got before. It's like, it means so much to us that you actually asked us how we're doing, and at a time when the answer could probably be bad. And so thank you for asking. Speaking of asking, reminder that you can post your questions in the Q&A part of CVent, and we are reading those, approving those, surfacing them. So thank you to so many of you who have done that already. Pamela, Andrea, Karen, we're going to get to your questions. Now we have the full panel, I think, up on the virtual stage here. Yes, great. Looks great. Hi, everybody. Let's jump into the first question. Okay. This is like an interview question. It's a behavioral interview question. You ready? Paybacks. Did you ever face the issue where a leader did not buy into the process? I'm sure the answer is yes. And how did you go about resolving it?
So this is Lori. So we had, I think Maria told the story. I mean, when we actually launched our COVID our engagement survey, it was right after we closed for the pandemic, and they were very concerned. Some of the leaders on the leadership team did not want us to do this, but by really convincing them that we needed to understand what was going on, how employees were feeling, and it was the right thing to do, rather than, and really actually spin the way we were going to approach the engagement survey. We actually changed the communication and said, this is not only an engagement survey, but we want to understand what's going on with you, because these are unprecedented times. And based on having that dialogue with the leadership team, we were able to convince them that we should move forward and do it. And to Maria's point, I mean, we are so glad that they agreed, because it's become foundational in managing this situation.
Is there a point at which, so none of you got this signal strongly enough, or you got it, and you'll tell me that in a second, but is there a point at which any of you would have, if you had gotten such a strong signal that this type of change, these types of bold moves of transparency, openness, are just going to be unacceptable in my part of the business, for example? Is there a point at which you walk away or wait, or do you continue to bring data and stories to the table? How do you judge? So some of the folks who might be asking these types of questions might not feel as comfortable as you might have, executing a bold strategy.
I can talk about our experience here at Textron. I don't know if it quite gets to the heart of the question, But like I said in our presentation, we were meant to roll out our very first engagement survey in April, right when COVID hit, and we all went out as well. And we failed to convince our leadership team at Textron that it was the right thing to do to send out our first engagement survey. So Jenessa and myself kind of pivoted. We said, okay, we can't control that. We weren't able, like Lori said, to convince them to do that, but we were able to convince our BU leadership to roll out a survey from the Bell perspective. And so I guess more of a story of what I'm trying to say is maybe just find a different way, find a different path. Jenessa, anything to add on to that?
I think the only thing I would add is just simply that people are talking, whether we formalize a survey or not, and kind of along the lines of what Bristol did in terms of just asking, how are you doing? We were having those conversations in the hallway anyway. So we were just allowing the content to be available and the answers to be available. So we kind of tried to really make it feel manageable and bite-sized, that this is just a way for you to get insights into what people are thinking. You're having these conversations anyway. But Kailey's right. We didn't have the big, broad engagement survey we had hoped for. What we did have was something that allowed us to pulse our environment and, act on those results.
I think and another example that I can give is when we integrated with Celgene. Celgene, we were still two separate companies, BMS and Celgene didn't do pulse surveys or didn't do annual engagement surveys. So when we approached them and said, hey, we'd like to understand your workforce better, it's important to us. We want to hear their feedback. We want to design a good integration experience. Initially, we got some pushback, and that was difficult. But what we kept kind of messaging is, we're doing this for the employees. We don't fully understand what your culture is like. We don't understand how your employees feel. I've never I've never been at a Celgene site. So how can we design something for you without fully understanding it? And by continuing to kind of shift, help them understand why we're doing it, what is the intent behind it, we were able to convince them that it was okay to send out a survey.
Let's stay on that topic, Lori and Maria. How have you continued? Do you plan to continue to connect with them and follow up with them, or is there a point at which you stop, right? And they're just part of the standard process, or the global process? For how long do you treat them differently?
Maria, do you want to take that question?
Sure. So by them, I'm assuming we mean Celgene.
Celgene, yes.
And really, we're one company, right? We're one new company now. We don't really we have the capability of breaking out Heritage Celgene from Heritage BMS scores, but really moving forward, we are one company. I think in reality, you have to look at that metrics until you see equity between the two scores, right? But from a communications perspective, from embedding the culture perspective, we are one company, and we refer to ourselves as one company.
Great. I want to stay on this topic of culture because you're talking, so one of the things we're talking about is culture strength. And for better or worse, some cultures are stronger, meaning they're more consistent throughout the organization, and some cultures are weaker. There are pockets of subcultures within. And there's a specific question from Pamela about the Bell barnacles that I want to kick back to Kailey and Jenessa. And the question is about demographic subgroups, and I think this speaks to culture strength. Were there pockets of the organization, whether they be by individual demographic or organizational demographic or attribute, or you had to do more work than others? And how did you go about that?
Jenessa, do you want me to start us out?
Sure.
Awesome. Well, in terms of organizational attributes, we just kind of knew contextually that there were some, we call them programs, but different aircraft types that just had these like reputations, more informal reputations of having a culture that wasn't exactly what we were aspiring to. So contextually, we knew that was happening. We just didn't have any evidence for it. But when the Glint survey came out during COVID, you could clearly see that those pockets where we thought we had bell barnacles, as you might call them, it truly came out in those numbers. And so I wouldn't say we found it from the survey, but the survey really helped us to talk about it in a way that was more based on evidence instead of just kind of having a feeling about it.
Yeah, and that's
Jenessa?
actually going to be our continued work, is looking deeper into the organization, and we're actually using our next main engagement survey to look at things from a more demographic perspective. And just frankly, Bell and Textron has a heavy military population, and we all know factually there's more men than women in the military. And so our organization is made up of more men. It's just a statistic fact right now. So we're now looking at how we can dive into demographic groups, and we focused a lot on diversity in the question sets that we chose to make sure that we could start to dig deeper into subcultures and to look at things by different data demographics.
Yes, that truly is our next step, is diving into those subcultures that we now have evidence that they're less engaged and less prescribed to the Bell culture we're trying to go to. We're trying to figure that out right now.
Yeah, that's great. Identify the area of interest and seek to understand. This is really good. There's so many good questions. It's so hard to choose. I want to switch over. Let's go back. Here's one for Lori and Maria. Maybe Maria, this is for you because you did such a good job sharing so many great concrete examples. Could you talk about how you're working to foster connection right now? Supporting these efforts.
So I think it's the new $1 million question, right? How are we keeping connected with our employees while everybody is in physically different locations? And I think our communications have been key in that. Like I said, it was the little things, right? So it was when we saw the first email come out from our CEO, and it was a selfie of him as he was jogging instead of his formal headshot. It made me feel like, okay, I'm not the only one trying to juggle what's going on. And I think it's been those small nuanced things instead of big strategic shifts that have really fostered the connections. I think opening our dashboards to our managers and enabling them to see data for their people really helped drive conversations. You know, we're big on it's a very fine line. You don't want to go and, go down the path of analysis paralysis, but you want to arm people with just enough information to have really insightful conversations. And I think that's the balance that we're finding. We give our managers just enough to have great conversations. And really, like I said, the whole company, we've been very fortunate. The whole company is really taken to the results and really owned the results, right? We haven't seen a lot of pushback on the results. We see every time Lori and I present, there's a lot of head nodding in the room to say, yep, that's how employees are feeling. And our pulses have been a great leading indicator, right? So we were able to spot our burnout creeping up and prioritization issues creeping up in surveys because we were able to pulse quarterly. And so we were able to action in more real time, and that helps solidify those connections, I think. Lori, anything you would add?
No, I think that's a great answer. The only additional thing I would add is that at Bristol Myers Squibb, we invest heavily in manager capability. So we did a lot of work helping our managers, foster connections with their employees. We held manager forums, and we leveraged, our engagement data to help build that connection and keep that connection with their teams.
It's so important. It shows up in so many of the cuts of the data that we look at, no matter the industry, the job type, connection in one form or another shows up as a key driver, both of well-being and of employee engagement. One of my friends and colleagues at LinkedIn is named Scott Shute. He has one of the coolest jobs in the world, which is the head of mindfulness and compassion. And he talks about compassion as like finding out that brownies are good for you. So this practice in the organization of empathizing with people and then also taking action to support the thing that you've just now come to understand. And I see that reflected in the lift each other up value, and in some of the other values that you all talked about. And both sets talked about how values drove the efforts. So I want to start with the lift each other up value, because that was a specific question that came in from Karen, but then also expand out and just talk about the role of values. So could you talk about this? Share some examples of what lift each other up means for employees in the organization. Maybe Kailey. Sorry.
I was like, Justin, who was that directed to?
I narrowed it, like it was a 50-50 shot between Kailey and Jenessa. Kailey, why don't you start?
Sure. So lift each other up is just consistently the top value that our CEO Mitch talks about. What he says frequently is that if you care more about the person sitting next to you than you do about yourself, then everyone's going to succeed. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's about us and the mission. And our mission makes people proud. And I think that's really helpful for us when we're trying to cultivate that value of lift each other up, is connecting people back to our mission and our purpose as an organization. So Jenessa, I'll start us out there. What input do you have?
Yeah, I always love that story. So thanks, Kailey, for sharing that. That's a really strong reflection of who our CEO is. He's just such a humble servant leader, as I mentioned. But one thing that we did that I thought was kind of interesting, and I haven't seen done at another company, is we just created guardrails of what it doesn't look like. Not to talk about necessarily or focus on the negative, but we talked about areas where you might want to overdo something. So one of our values is find a better way. And sometimes, finding a better way can be at the expense of your camaraderie or your colleagues, right? So it's thinking about how you balance different values together so that you're being kind of the best version of yourself. And like Mitch says, and like we talk about, doing something that is more for the other person rather than your own self-serving interest. And I found the guardrail so fascinating, and it just helps us to talk about things in every language, and it helps become a watch out for, I wouldn't have thought about it like that, or I could see how someone's behavior could lend them to want to take that to the absolute edge and overdo it, frankly.
Those are such good examples. Lori, Maria, are there any other examples you'd share from your experience of how you and your leaders are working together to convert these intended values into actual habits?
Yeah. So our values, came together across, they evolved based on our original BMS values and our Celgene values. And we actually did a cultural diagnostic, and that's how we came up with them. So they actually resonate really well with our employee population, and they're very centered around our mission. If you go to a site at Bristol Myers Squibb, or if you go to our website, we are very, very focused on our patients. And if you think about urgency is all around discovering drugs quickly. So, to help people who are either suffering from serious disease or discovering, that cure for disease. Innovation, the same. Integrity, making sure, what we do is of high quality. And passion is a really big value for us, because that's what we do every day. We have passion for our patients. So that's kind of, core to what we do. What we also did is we did a number of ways of working sessions. So when we came together, with the understanding of our values being our North Star, we led a lot of ways of working sessions that actually my colleague Amy Anderson led. And we did that within the different functions to talk about how do we shift our ways of working to achieve these values. So that's how we approached it. For our engagement survey, which is kind of interesting, we've been pulsing mostly just on the values to get an understanding, like, do you feel we're here yet? Like, you know, how do you feel about urgency? How do you feel about passion? Next year, we're going to add a couple of additional questions around ways of working to really kind of test the waters. And we're going to advise leaders, you know, use those ways of working to kind of further evolve embedding our values.
That's great. Thank you for sharing those. It's so hard. We could do a whole session. We should do a whole session next time, Sam, on asking about culture, because you know, we're going after the behaviors, but we often ask about the values. It's a tricky thing to measure. And a teaser that there will be a Glint standard culture program available in January in ODS, and so that's coming. That's coming soon. I want to, let's see, I think we have time for one or two more questions. Let's go back to, I think, Jenessa, was it you who mentioned the techie managers, helping techie managers share results? Or was it Kailey?
That was Kailey.
I think that was me.
Kailey, let's go. Will you dive in a little bit to how you helped the techie managers share results?
Yeah, so we have some leaders. Well, let me start with an example. When we rolled out our second COVID pulse, which was when we allowed our managers to get access to the dashboard, we had a variety of leaders attend this very short training we just put on by ourselves, like a 15-minute, really short, just the basics. And I had a couple of leaders reach out and be like, I am so excited about this. It's going to be so great. And I knew those were not the people I had to worry about. They were on board. They were going to use the tool. It was great. It's the people that didn't reach out that I was a little bit concerned of. And so those people, you know, it's hard to single them out and be like, hi, Mr. or Mrs. Joe, you know, here's a framework for you. But those are the intentional groups that I think we put more work in for, even though we didn't know exactly who they were. So if the whole organization was like those people that were excited, you know, we probably wouldn't have to put the framework together. But we went to that 350 biweekly leader meeting. We call it Ops Forum. We presented on the results. We said, hello, you leader, you have access to the results. We need you to have an ACT conversation. And so really the ACT conversation is what has carried us through and giving people a really simple understanding of what to do. And so thank you to Glint for putting that together. We use it heavily and we really rely on it to give people a framework, you know, XYZ, really simple. Here's what you need to do. And it won't take long.
Well, I'm going to close it there and tell a somewhat funny story, a little inside joke from my team. We worked a long time to get to create a concrete and sustainable framework that wasn't just like catchy and memorable, but also useful. And that's what came out with ACT. And so in case you don't know what it is, the A stands for acknowledge where you are. The C stands for collaborate on a focus area. And the T stands for take one step forward. And the inside joke is that this is actually what I use with my kids. I have twins, they're 5. And when things happen that aren't as good as we want them to be, we use this framework. I understand you're not happy about this. Let's work together on a solution. And you know, why don't we just do this one thing first? It's brilliant. It works in all parts of your life, and you're free to use it wherever you'd like. Thank you all so much. I wrote down so many great examples that I'm going to use, that others can use to build connection, to build alignment, and you know, to thrive in chaotic times. So I'm so grateful for the time you put into sharing these stories with us, and again for your courage in your practice. Thanks so much. With that, I will pass it over to Katie. Katie, I'm interrupting this message to tell you you're on mute. It looks really inspiring. Start over. Yeah, I'm going to unmute you. Here we go. Okay, Marvin's going to bring you back. Okay, Katie, take it away.
All right. If that's not authenticity, guys, I don't know what is. So anyway, where I was going with that is that what we've got coming up is our water cooler break. So one of the things that I mentioned this morning is that connection is dropping. And it is one of the things that we are missing so much in this moment. And also one of the things that is best about getting together for the People Success Summit is not only networking with people who are just as passionate as we are about people success, about employee engagement, about our people being happier and more successful, but it's also debriefing on what we've learned today and what are the next steps we're going to take. So I'd really encourage you to jump into the next session that's going to be led by Chris and Melissa to network with your peers as well as to debrief. And then you'll join me back here for a session about building inspiration through stories, which we've just gotten a masterclass on from Bell and from Bristol Myers Squibb. So join you back here and I will see you later.